Hello humans, Mr. Bell here with drawing exercise number 10. Today is October 5th, and this activity is entitled Reference Fingers. That's reference, R-E-F-E-R-E-N-C-E, fingers, F-I-N-G-E-R-S, reference fingers. So do entitle it that, put the date, and put the drawing exercise number in the upper right-hand corner of your drawing. There is a bunch of different references to choose from that I have provided, or you can always look up your own reference image if you want, that just as long as it's like an interesting picture, close-up of a human hand, really anything is fine. This is the particular reference picture that I'm going to be using. Notice that I already kind of drew in where those sausages are going to be. If you have a printable copy of a hand drawing, I would recommend using this trick. It just kind of helps a little bit, but it is absolutely not necessary to do this at all. Just looking at the picture on your Chromebook will work just fine for this. Honestly, really, I'm going to be working digitally on this. You just won't be able to see it. I only printed this out so you can tell specifically which reference I am using. So I'm going to put that one to the side. I have already drawn essentially this shape that I have right here. So this is kind of where I'm going to begin drawing. I chose this shape to draw first before I made the video just to illustrate that this is a pretty straightforward shape that doesn't really take any like thinking about perspective and thinking about like proportions of fingers. So first I'm going to draw the wrist part that connects to it, just because that'll kind of show me where things are. I'm purposely overlapping this shape, and then this wrist probably will go right around to there, right around to there. Okay, so I have this shape, and I have the wrist kind of fleshed out, what they maybe will ultimately look like. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the thumb part that I have. So I'm going to start with a shape that kind of connects to this shape that I already drew. So I'm going to start with this knuckle of the thumb. And I think it'll be right around here. Kind of comes about to the middle of the hand as I look at it and try to picture it in my mind. So it comes to right around there. Then the other knuckle goes to around there, and since this is a pretty straightforward picture of the thumb, I know that these sausages should probably be about the same length, thinking about that human proportion that we almost all of us have. And then it kind of sticks up a little bit over here. So voila, I have a sausage thumb. I'm going to flesh in where that web of that finger is, just because I think it helps the hand really look more realistic as I go. Now I'm going to kind of tackle the hard parts, which are like the knuckles in here and then the fingers. So look at this reference. This finger, this knuckle appears to be much longer than, say, this one or this one. Or then if you look at the pinky down here, this one really only even shows the very first knuckle of the pinky. And the rest of the finger is probably curled behind it, so you can't see it. So this gets a little bit more difficult to start thinking about how to draw. So that's why you should really approach it one section at a time. I have my printed copy marked off. But when you're looking at it digitally, just really imagine these sausages over the knuckle where the bone of your finger actually is. Remember, this is one oval, two ovals, three ovals. If I curl my finger, these ovals change shape, right? But it's still ultimately the same finger. So when you're drawing these, really think about how fingers can look totally different depending on which angle you're drawing it from. But they really always do have this overall proportion. Sometimes they're hidden, sometimes you can see them, but they always have that same 3-section part. So I'm going to draw the knuckle shapes that I have already marked here first, just to kind of give me a place to where to connect these fingers. So this one looks like it comes up to right around there. And this guy right here. This will also, like, fleshing out this part of the back of the hand, especially. If yours happens to be one like this, I kind of tend to treat this like it's a own shape when I draw hands. But you can kind of divide that big, long, oval bean shape into 4 distinct circles. For the back of the hand, especially since you can see these knuckles, I usually treat these as 4 different shapes. Always those weird kind of amorphous sausage shapes. Then looking at this one has one right around here. And the last one is right about here. Depends on the shape of somebody's hands. This is where hands can get a little different. But if you really look at your knuckles, they are kind of the same size. Your pinky, even though it's a lot shorter than your other fingers, the knuckles in it are about the same size. It's just different proportions. So I have my knuckle shapes kind of fleshed out. And now I'm going to go with the pointer finger here first, just because I think it's going to be probably the easiest to draw, because it's the most stretched out. So looking at my reference, thinking about how this sausage shape would be probably right around there. Now I'm going to look at this one. So I know that this knuckle is in reality the same length as this one about, but it looks a lot smaller. So as I draw it, I'm going to draw it a lot smaller, and that'll help it appear to be kind of fading into the background because it's a little bit shorter. Again, this is where this gets more difficult in how to do. This is where you kind of have to start making up a little bit of information as you go, and you have to really kind of pay attention to the reference, right? So you have to kind of like just let it guide you with how long these sausage shapes would actually be. And remember, if you mess it up, just kind of go back over it, man. It's okay to overlap them. It's okay if they don't overlap. They don't have to be perfect. So now I'm looking at this middle finger, and it starts to point downward even more. So I know that, like, I can compare this knuckle to this one. And look at the difference in the shapes and the sizes of it to kind of illustrate how I'm going to draw this finger. Looking at it, kind of points down a little bit. And these knuckles, since they're about on the same angle, the viewer is looking at these from about the same angle, and the fingers are kind of pointing in the same direction. I can tell that this knuckle and this knuckle are going to be about the same size. The middle finger being a little bit longer, just because I know that middle fingers are a little bit longer than pointer fingers on the human hand. So I'm going to do that, and now it starts to point really drastically down. So I'm going to really, really shrink it down. And then this last one, it really gets a little bit smaller. So as I start to draw this, you realize this is starting to look a little wonky. Right? And then it'll even get a little bit more wonky as I draw this. But these are going to be really good, helpful guides for when you draw that hand, because it doesn't look like just a flat-out hand. It's a hand that is in a weird position. So I'm going to draw this knuckle best as I can. Right around there. And then there is a little sausage there, but it's just tiny, because this finger is really pointing away from us now. And then you don't even really see the end of the ring finger there. It just kind of disappears. And then this pinky knuckle, really, it's just like maybe about half the length that it really would be. And you basically don't see the other parts of it because it'd be hidden behind it. So this is where I want you to end this exercise. I am going to go ahead and just kind of draw out where the skin might be on this hand, just to illustrate that even though this looks pretty funky and this doesn't look like a real human hand, it's actually fairly accurate. You just have to flesh it out. Looking at the thumb, however, I think it is a little big. So I am going to redo that. If you are inspecting yours and you notice something that just doesn't look right, that's a big part of drawing things accurately. Recognizing when you didn't draw it perfectly accurately or accurate as you want it to be, and then going back and redoing it. That is the magic of an eraser too. I think this is looking a lot more proportioned accurately. Looking at that, yeah, it's about the same length. Yeah, I think that is a lot more accurate. So again, this is where I want you to end this exercise. So drawing a hand that ends up looking a little bit like this. Again, I'm only pushing this forward just to kind of illustrate to you and kind of prove to even myself that this is going to end up looking like a relatively accurate hand. So I'm just fleshing out where that skin is quickly. I'm not going to really talk about how I'm doing it or what I'm thinking about in it. I'm just going to do it. This is kind of, as we do think forward, this is kind of the direction that I want you to be thinking in, is taking these ovals that we've been making, these sausage fingers, and changing them and putting skin on them and using them more as like a guide tool as opposed to an actual drawing. Like ultimately, hopefully, our hands, really, you're not going to even be able to see where these fingers kind of came from. And then this pinky, this really wonky looking pinky kind of sticks off to the side. Put in that webbing of the fingers will really help it look a little bit more accurate. Erase this jazz. Then I'm going to kind of use these sausage shapes to blend them together, and I can start making these shapes and kind of stop thinking about where the sausages are, and now I can really start thinking about how the sausages connect. And I'm going to use my eraser as a tool to get rid of them, because they're no longer adding to the realism of the hand. Rather than that, they're taking away from it. Let's go there. Thinking of that, he's got a pretty good angle there on the wrist. Let's finish there. And again, too, remember, my particular style of drawing is pretty sketchy. I use a lot of kind of different lines to really represent where I think things are. If you have a much more crisp style or like an even more sketchy style or anything like that, really any style that you use is totally fine. There really is no right way. Then I'm going to flesh out this pinky just because it's killing me that it looks just like it's kind of a cut-off pinky rather than it actually exists. I'm going to try to push some of these knuckle lines in there. Maybe go what I think it's a little bit skinny. So again, a big part to accurately drawing things is to be able to look at it and recognize the parts that don't look right and try to fix them. Most people that draw super accurately, really what they're doing is they're drawing it over and over again. And they're slowly fixing their mistakes to get it back to the point where they really want it to be. Okay, that's looking a lot better. So now the next step, really, for making hands look like actual hands and accurately drawing them, again, that comes with the shadows. Those shadows, like the lower arm here, and this deep shadow in this gentleman's wrist, or this faint shadow on the vein. That's where the reality really exists. But for now, this I think is pretty stinking good, and I'm going to call this an end. I want you guys to spend the rest of class working on these drawings.